Hello, and welcome back to the Shakey Sonnet Show. I am Tootight Lautrec, the drag laureate of the Sonnetarium, and here we are once again in the Sonnetarium at the bottom of the down staircase in the permanently sequestered remainders section of an unnamed local library where two lions have I of concrete and dirty air peering down at us here in the Sonnetarium as we look at sonnets 143 and 144, in which our love-lorn narrator bemoans yet again, or still, the neglected state of his bed and body and beyond. Sonnet 143 is an odd little number which consists of a three-quatrain analogy depicting the mistress as a housewife, or as it's pronounced, hussif. The mistress as a housewife, the narrator's rivals as birds, and the narrator as the mistress's neglected baby. Now, George Stephens, who was one of the earliest editors of the sonnets, wrote about Sonnet 143 in 1780. He wrote this: "This image with which the sonnet begins is at once pleasing and natural, but the conclusion of it is lame and impotent indeed." Let's see what he's on about, shall we? Sonnet 143, and again I'll be reading from the New Cambridge Shakespeare, edited by G. Blakemore Evans, because I've still got my fountain pen splooge on the other side of this page of my favorite version of the sonnets. But so we'll go with Sonnet 143 from here. And housewife is pronounced hussif, which is how I'll pronounce it. 143. Lo, as a careful hussif runs to catch one of her feathered creatures broke away, sets down her babe and makes all swift dispatch in pursuit of the thing she would have stay, whilst her neglected child holds her in chase, cries to catch her, whose busy care is bent to follow that which flies before her face, not prizing her poor infant's discontent. So run'st thou after that which flies from thee, whilst I, thy babe, chase thee afar behind. But if thou catch thy hope, turn back to me, and play the mother's part. Kiss me, be kind. So will I pray that thou mayst have thy will, if thou turn back, and my loud crying still. Okay, so we'll deal with all three quatrains at once, because it is one long analogy, set up with pretty clear descriptions in the first two quatrains, and then completed in the third quatrain, where he reveals the equivalencies. He paints a pretty clear picture of a woman getting distracted by one of her feathered creatures broke away, who Booth identifies as the dandified rivals, or the popinjays, who are the mistress's suitors. Now, why they are broke away and running for her is up for grabs. Perhaps chicks and ducks and geese better scurry when Shakespeare takes you out in a hurry in one of his sonnets. Who knows? But she runs after her fine feathered creatures, her fine feathered things, completely neglecting her poor infant, who we learn in the third quatrain is our narrator. And it's all pretty clearly delineated here. It's not that difficult to understand. A couple of notes is that she's a careful hussif, or a careful housewife. Careful can mean both attentive and anxious. And here it appears to be more anxious than attentive, because she drops the baby by the side while she goes flying off after fine feathered things. And as I said before, housewife is pronounced hussif, calling to mind also hussy. And it goes through the scene pretty clearly. And then we get to line 10, where the narrator identifies himself as the baby, whilst I, thy babe, chase thee afar behind. And it does seem to me that this narrator has been chasing behind through much of the sonnets. I'm just saying. So it's an odd little thing, because in the third quatrain, but if thou catch thy hope, what could that mean? If thou catch thy hope, which is maybe snag one of the popinjays that's flying away from you, or that you satisfy your whim, or that you satisfy your sexual desire with one of these popinjays, then you can turn back to me, kiss me, and be kind, the way that you should have done in the first place. And it's an odd little image with an odd little summary, because he's saying, go on, have your little fling. I'll be waiting right here for you, neglected, unhappy, apparently without 1 ounce of self-respect, but waiting for you all the same. And then, if you do turn back to me, we get the couplet. So will I pray that thou mayst have thy will, if thou turn back and my loud crying still. So I'll pray that you get what you really wanted all along, that thou mayst have thy will, which could mean get what you want, both me and him or them, or 2, have your way with me and I'll give you what you've been seeking all along and give it to you good, or have me, thy will, William, who apparently is the name of the narrator here, similar to William Shakespeare, the writer of the series, or 4, you can have your will, which is my Willie, or it could also mean somebody else's Willie. But only if you turn back to quiet my loud crying still, meaning to quiet. If you turn back to quiet my loud crying, only after you do that can you have what you will. Because isn't a whiny man with no ounce of self-respect crying for a beloved to come back to him what everybody wants and what everybody finds so irresistibly attractive? To which I say, sheesh, I don't think so. Let me know how that works out. But wait a minute. Actually, I think Sonnet 144 gives us a hint to how that works out. And before we begin with 144, I'll give you a little bit of a history about it. Like Sonnet 138, Sonnet 144 also originally appeared in the 1599 Passionate Pilgrim, but the 1609 quarto version isn't really that much different from the one that appeared in the 1599 Passionate Pilgrim. And so I will just link the GR Ledger online Shakespeare version, so that he does a very good job of giving that version and talking about the differences, the slight differences between them. I don't think it's really worth talking about. So you can look at that yourselves, and I will link that below. Now, many scholars suggest that Sonnet 144 represents a conflict between sensual or sexual love, the lady, versus pure or rational love, which is the friend. And that Sonnet 144 shows the narrator's despair because the sexy lady is tainting the pure young man. Not bloody likely from my vantage point. Many other scholars contend that Sonnet 144 is virulently misogynistic, but, and I can see how they can come to that conclusion. But for me, the misogyny seems confined to this one specific character in this series, and not to all women in general. Although it does depend on certain tropes like Eve, the destroyer of paradise, and the Christian ideas of sex as filthy. But if you think about it, if we go back to Sonnet 129, which is the lust in action sonnet, it's lust as a distraction, which is the destructive force, not necessarily the object of affection or the object of desire. Because if you think about it, if you've ever had a crush on someone and that someone walks into the room and your heart goes all aflutter and you get all flushed and you're all distracted and you can't concentrate on what you're what you're supposed to be doing because the person who you have a crush on is in the room. The person on whom you have a crush may have no idea that you even exist. The problem is with you. The problem is with desire. The problem is with lust. And it's not with the object of desire. So here, the woman is the object of desire. It's not necessarily... I don't really believe that Shakespeare is besmirching the... Well, he is kind of, we'll see in a bit. But he's foisting the distraction of lust and the evils of lust onto his object of affection. In any case, let's crack on and look at Sonnet 144. Sonnet 144. Two loves I have of comfort and despair, which like two spirits do suggest me still. The better angel is a man right fair, the worser spirit a woman colored ill. To win me soon to hell, my female evil tempteth my better angel from my side, and would corrupt my saint to be a devil, wooing his purity with her foul pride. And whether that my angel be turned fiend, suspect I may, yet not directly tell, but being both from me, both to each friend, I guess one angel in another's hell. Yet this shall I ne'er know, but live in doubt, till my bad angel fire my good one out. Well, he spells it out quite clearly in the first line. Two loves I have of comfort and despair. He loves comfort, he loves despair. We've seen this masochistic tendency all throughout the sonnet, through the whole series, even those involving the fair young man. Love hurts. We've learned that already. These two spirits do suggest me still. Suggest simply means to tempt. They tempt me. So he's got these two, an angel on one side and a devil on the other, and they're both tempting him. His better angel is a man right fair, and the worser spirit is a woman colored ill. We know these characters. We've seen them before all throughout the series. The second quatrain. She tempted him. She's wooing his purity with her foul pride. And foul pride could be her horrible allure, her ugly vanity, or her sexual readiness. But my question is this the saint, this pure young man that we've seen from Sonnet 48? Thou to whom my jewels trifles are, the narrator said to the young man. Or from Sonnet 46, mine eyes dew is thy outward part, suggesting something a little lascivious. Or is this the master mistress from Sonnet 20, pricked out for women's pleasure? It doesn't seem he's as pure as this sonnet seems to be making him out. So there's a little bit of doubt in my mind cast upon the purity of this particular angel. We get to the third quatrain. And whether that my angel be turned fiend, suspect I may, yet not directly tell. So I don't know for sure. Suspect I may. Also, write a 154 sonnet sequence about it all, I may. I suspect my angel has gotten into my devil's hell. And yes, hell was Elizabethan slang for a vagina. So, hello misogyny. But it's an odd little couplet. Yet this shall I ne'er know, but live in doubt, till my bad angel fire my good one out. I'll never know. Or, at least I won't know until my bad angel fire my good one out. Until she releases him emotionally. Until she releases him sexually from her tight vagina. Till she possibly drives him away by giving him a fiery hot case of venereal disease, some editors contend. Till she wears him out sexually, or as Tucker so quaintly says in 1924, he says, this is the fires of passion and the burning of concupiscence. To which I say, yes, indeed it is. So, do we have a gender? We certainly have a gender. We've got party, party, party all over the place. Dramatically, Stevens notes, because of course, you know, anything having to do with jealousy, Othello seems to come up, but there is a line in Othello that someone says someone curses his better angel from his side, which we see echoed in these sonnets. Narratively, what's going on in this love relationship? Tick tock is what's going on. Is it over yet? Almost, it seems. If we are going to string together these sonnets into the form of a narrative, and we are, and any kind of a narrative, your narrative may be completely different from mine, but what seems clear is that the characters in this narrative are quite distinct from those that we have seen in the plays. There's, you know, we've seen an evil woman in Lady Macbeth, but we've seen also a very charming woman in Beatrice, and also we've seen a virtuous woman in Cymbeline, the Imogen in Cymbeline. So we've seen all kinds of women all throughout Shakespeare's plays, and here we've got a lusty woman who seems smart, seems funny, seems playful, but also seems to be not that into the narrator. And we have this narrator who's in the guise of a Petrarchan narrator or the Sonnetarian narrator, the poor guy who can't get the beloved to love him back. But he's sort of like a pathetic wretch in a lot of ways. So they're distinct characters, and they are, in my view, they are just as original, just as complicated, and just as faulty and human, and also just as compelling as many of the characters in Shakespeare's plays. So it does also seem to me that the events depicted in Part 2, these Dark Lady sonnets, are concurrent or could be read concurrently with many of the sonnets in Part 1, the young man sonnets, and that in all of them our poor little narrator is left as the odd man out. Now, none of this seems like very much fun for our poor little narrator, and I say thank the bard for that, because whatever kind of narrative this is that's being built, it certainly is compelling, and it certainly delves deeply into the wonders of the human condition. And yes, I said it. I'll say it again. Wonders. The world is full of them, and so are the sonnets full of them. Pay attention. We'll go into the next 10 sonnets shortly. Next week, in fact, we'll go start the next 2 of the last 10 sonnets that we're going to be looking at in this series. And until then, I'm Tootight Lautrec.